to the party, pal. There's just something about them, isn't there? 80s and 90s movies created a lasting impression that helped the HK MP5 itself become an iconic action hero. I love MP5s, and I also love gas blowbacks, so when a manufacturer combines the two, that's when I become very interested. This manufacturer doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to their gas guns, so I'm usually reluctant to invest in them because of my own personal experiences. And then they made their second generation MP5, the Umarex licensed HK MP5 SD3 gas blowback submachine gun by VFC. Hey guys, BadaBing here, thanks for joining me. VFC have once again taken advantage of my love for H&K guns. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. I just had to try this one out and see if it's actually any good. I was so close to buying one of their first gens, but the general feedback didn't paint it in a positive light. The Old Gas Blowback Archives channel released a video showing you how to build a Skirmish Worthy VFC MP5. And that doesn't inspire confidence in a platform, does it? I must have watched that video 20 times before I decided to move on to other things. Now my question is the version 2 Skirmish Worthy? Well, hook yourself up with a cup of coffee and let's find out. The VFC MP5 SD3 is the first variant of their upcoming Gen 2 series. I got this from Action Airsoft online store, and they provided excellent service, keeping me up to date with the processing, shipping, etc. The box is the same old Umarex box that they ship everything inside, and along with the MP5, it includes a 30 round version 2 magazine, the manuals, speed loader, and hop-up tool. Removing the MP5 from its plastic bag, you can expect it to be dripping in oil. Well, mine was anyway. I don't think I can actually articulate how gorgeous this MP5 is. We all knew its externals would be the best feature of the gun. Attention to detail is something they always do exceptionally well. The classic lines, the hue, the feel, even the smell is an experience in itself. The finish of the stamped steel body is pristine. Visually, it has no flaws. The surface coating bonds well with the curves, just like a silk bedsheet draped over a supermodel. And the HK MP5 SD markings? Speaking of the markings, those 3 little letters on both sides of the lower receiver, this is pure filth. I'm not used to wrapping my hands around the SEF trigger group. I've always had the Navy versions. Aside from this part here, and this bump here, the grip is actually quite comfortable in my hand. Of course, we cannot escape the clutches of Umarex, but they've done a good job to subdue their licensing information. In hand, the build quality is good. Not perfect, just good. I think what sticks out the most is the SD handguard, which rattles in its place, and doesn't feel that nice to hold onto. Grip onto it for any length of time, and the impression left on your hand is what you'd expect to see if you've been swimming for a long time. The suppressor does have some wiggle in it, and unscrewing would reveal a 330mm inner barrel, which also wobbles around. The charging handle rattles and feels flimsy. The cocking tube within looks cheap, and within seconds of it being out of the box, its gritty charging action reveals flakes of metal scratched off the surface. The fit between the upper and lower receiver is perfect, with a good lockup. Nice. Aside from the foregrip and the stock, it's a solid sub-gun. The A3 stock is something of a concern though. The metal rails are quite rigid in relation to its base, but the entire stock has some up and down play to it from its attachment to the receiver. Not impressed at all by that. Yeah, it's still a toy gun, but the problem is, it's not a rigid frame to pull into your shoulder. It can be quite stubborn to actually deploy the stock as well. I guess it'll bed in its own time. If you've played around with MP5s, you'll know exactly how cool these sights are. The rear diopter drum has those positive heavy rotation selections, and finds each aperture with a good click. The front iron sight looks like a quality replication, and it seems like the post is removable. Aftermarket night sights or a tritium front post would be cool. Taking a look at the MP5's functions and controls, my favourite isn't actually the charging handle, it's the selector switch. It's so chunky and positive, it's great to use. No middle ground whatsoever, it locks into every mode with a deep clunk. Unfortunately, it's only available for righties because lefties weren't invented in those days. The charging handle has a clickety-clackety feel to it. Pulling back the working parts isn't as smooth as the WE MP5. It doesn't have much of a long travel either. Here's what I mean. It'll only go back so far until you have to drag it around a corner to lock it. There isn't enough room for the working parts to move rearward for an easy pull back and sweep up motion. The version 2 magazine finish is excellent. Proper stamped steel, and it even mimics the feed lips at the top. The capacity is exactly 30 bb's, and empty of gas, it weighs 484 grams. The BB feed lips are metal as well. Loading the magazine is easy, and the BBs transfer smoothly, even without using the adapter. The pins can be pushed out easily by hand, and the field strip is identical to the real MP5. Even the lower fire control parts can be taken out of the grip without tools. Simply rotate north of safe and pull out the switch. Now it's all apart, we can search for those all-important steel components. Most of the fire control parts lack any kind of attraction from a magnet. The selector switch, the pins, the ejector lever and release lever appear to be the only ones that are steel. The bolt carrier is also some kind of alloy, although its new buffer extension, guide rod and springs all indicate. Remaining steel parts of this MP5 include the entire upper receiver, front and rear iron sights, stock end cap, push pins and a few other smaller components. By the way, the charging handle and the cocking tube are not among the list of steel components. What an idiotic move. I can't say for certain how many HK karate chops it can take, just don't be surprised if the worst were to happen. The new features VFC introduced in this version 2 include a redesigned bolt carrier assembly, The most notable difference is the new recoil spring and buffer. Best of all is the increased cylinder size, which should deliver better performance than their older gen MP5. The magazines have also been improved and are said to be more gas efficient. The hop-up chamber is identical to their older version. From what I've heard, it wasn't that amazing to begin with. Removing the handguard allows access to the hop-up chamber. While we're here, we can see the lengths VFC have gone to in order to replicate the gas ports from the real SD. The barrel assembly is locked into the receiver somewhat imprecisely with 2 grub screws. One of the most awful features that survived into the second generation is the hop-up adjustment. Using the long thin Allen key to adjust the hop-up is one of the worst things on this MP5. I cannot begin to describe my hatred for it. Having to almost completely filter strip the gun in order to calibrate. It's an absolute waste of time, but I'll get into that later. From the factory, the version 2 MP5 is highly gassed. Their reported FPS hovers around 400. Far too hot for where I am, so I've had an FG Airsoft 20% LFS disc installed. Its smaller opening helps to reduce the FPS to comfortable CQB standards. With a 10-second charge of propane and using G&G .2s, we can see the data from the first to last shot. Overall, it loses 30.4 FPS over the course of the 30 shots, with an average of 289.4. Having only a finite amount of fuel, you have to expect a decline. Shooting this MP5. It's good. It's really good. I've been testing it out for the past 2 months, just waiting for it to fail, but it's still here. It's burnt through 2 cans of propane, and I've got to say it's such a fun time. It has a clean, snappy cyclic rate. Every shot is sharp and crisp. The whole experience seduces you, begging you to continue shooting, and before you know it, the magazine is empty. The recoil isn't heavy. Being a replica of a 9mm subgun, it's not supposed to be, but it definitely has a sweet thump as the little bolt carrier does its thing. How it delivers its performance in hand is quite simply excellent. The trigger has a short spongy pull with no discernible wall. After the break, it pulls your finger back forward with the spring tension, and gives off a deep positive clunk as it resets. It's not fancy, it just works. The bolt stop. Yeah, it's unchanged from the first generation MP5s. It still relies on a chunky BB follower within the magazine to stop the nozzle inside the bolt carrier from returning to battery and resetting for continuous firing. This is a very primitive solution to keep their MP5 from dry firing, and it's a way for VFC to avoid spending money on R&D. What's more, the charging handle flops around when not supported by the bolt. The sensation is not too different from the bolt locking back on an AR-15. When you remove the magazine, the bolt carrier completes its journey, sliding off the follower and returning to the chamber. I'm concerned about the longevity of this arrangement. The BB followers and the nozzle look alright for the time being, but I'll be interested to see how other people get on with it when these version 2s are released worldwide. This is potentially an accident waiting to happen. Now, the MP5 on fully auto. It loves it. It goes through the 30 BBs just as quickly as the real thing. Providing you don't overgas the magazine, it will be empty in a couple of seconds, with hardly a sign of cooldown. To get the best magazine dump performance, 7 or 8 seconds of green gas is all it really needs. And that's actually sufficient for 3 complete fully auto magazine dumps, but you will notice a decrease in rate of fire during the second load. That's 90 rounds. Speaking of gas within the magazine, I recorded some stats of what this MP5 is capable of per gas fill. Now these are quite impressive figures, especially the amount of shots to a 15-second gas charge, but keep in mind I was shooting 1 per second. It has no bearing when you're out on the playing field, and I really would not recommend filling as much as 25 grams of gas into your magazine. You'll likely be firing liquid gas at people. It's not good for the performance, and it's terribly impolite. The accuracy is practically the worst aspect of this MP5. At 20 meters, the placement of the Jeff's Bio 3s could not be easily anticipated from one shot to the next. A few shots torn through the paper right on the front post. The following volley of BBs would then fly all around the target. To date, I've fired a couple of thousand rounds, bedding in the hop-up. It still hasn't stabilised to the point where you could count on it. Doesn't help matters that it takes ages to adjust the hop-up, and even then, it didn't appear to matter anyway. I think I got lucky with this last sheet and scored 15 hits out of 30. This is the best I could come up with. The Umarex HK MP5 SD3 version 2. It looks beautiful, and its finish is superb. The attention to detail is something they always do well. The HK MP5 SD markings, the outer barrel ports, and the bolt ejector pin. The body of its construction is solid, with its steel receiver gives a really good weight in the hand. The magazines are easy to load and perform really well. It can accept upgrade valves made for the previous gen MP5, so AMG valves would be a fun upgrade. The MP5 itself is a great shooter. It fires nice and snappy with a realistic rate of fire. With regular old propane, it is a dynamite blaster. The internals are easy to access for maintenance. This MP5 can accept aftermarket inner barrels. For example, Maple Leaf Crazy Jets for the VFC and WE gas blowbacks are compatible. Crusader produce a full steel trigger pack that's compatible with both the G3 and this MP5, a reassuring prospect for potential buyers. And this is just the beginning of VFC's version 2 series, with the other variants becoming available at a later date. So, what's the bad news? First of all, the accuracy is dreadful. I'd say upgrades would be mandatory. Potentially adding to its inaccuracy, the suppressor, outer barrel, and inner barrel assembly wobbles. Its hop-up adjustment is just as bad, and they should have really used the same method of adjustment that's present on their G3, which is a rotary wheel underneath the handguard. Gas blowback type buckings aren't directly a drop-in fit, as the hop-up chamber lacks the slot for the rubber tab. The A3 stock has its up and down play. While it provides some versatility, being able to collapse it, it's not a rigid frame to shoot with. The bolt stop is another unforgivable feature. They go to all these lengths to make it a gorgeous replica, but are unwilling to formulate a solution that best accompanies a prestige MP5 such as this. The MP5 cannot continuously dry fire, as the magazines do not feature a dry fire mode. Most of the internals are not steel. Their M4s and HK416s have a high number of steel internal components. Shame they didn't show the same attention to their MP5. Based on my history with the FC, spare parts can be difficult to come by, and only available from a few places. VFC Service Center, Action Airsoft Online Store, and WGC Shop. So here we are, back to my opening question. Is this a Skirmish Worthy MP5? At the moment, no. You will have to get pretty close to guarantee a hit, so it'll need the necessary upgrades to get the BBs to hit what you're aiming at and produce nice consistent groupings. Once you've got it to that stage, then it'll be Skirmish Worthy. Putting the worrying negatives aside for a moment, this has to be the best VFC gas blowback I've owned so far. The SD3 has fed and fired every BB I've HK slapped the bolt onto, and despite its lack of steel internals, it's kept on blazing. It loves being shot. Obviously those version 2 improvements have done a good job. According to version 1 owners, the only required fairly inexpensive upgrades to get them running reliably. Bolt guides to centralize the bolt travel was one of the main ones. It's difficult to compare the version 1s I've seen on YouTube and the version 2 that I have in my hands. However, from what I've seen, the general operation of the version 2 system is the evolution that their MP5 needed. It's been a long time coming. Yet, more could have been done to really solidify their dominance in the gas MP5 market, of which only a few manufacturers compete. Is it good enough to stand toe-to-toe with the current champ? We shall see. Thanks for watching the video, my friends. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, show me by hitting the like. If you haven't already done so, subscribe and become notified for when my next video goes live. What do you think of VFC's latest version 2 MP5? You gonna get one, or are you gonna be buying something else? Let me know down below. You can find this MP5 by checking out Action Airsoft Online Store. Links in the description. For regular updates you can follow me on Facebook and on Instagram. So until next time, take care of yourselves. Catch you in a bit.